Ready to rock. Awesome. Okay. So if you're not sitting at a place that has some papers, you can move to a place that has papers or take papers from another seat. We won't be learning like entirely in the text, but we'll definitely anchor inside. This is a mimer from Likutei Torah. It looks a little bit intimidating, all the small little letters. But I think we gain a lot when we actually learn it from inside. In general, the style of the Alter Rebbe, whose mimer this is very concise, and sort of we go from one concept to another concept to another concept, all to explain the first concept. So we will be doing a little bit of concept jumping, but hopefully come back to answer all the questions at the end. And we're going to be doing this over 2 classes because it's definitely too much for one. So it's not going to be this week and next week. It will be this week and in 2 weeks from now. This is a mimer about sourced in the Haftarah for the 3rd week of the 3 weeks. So it's going to be the Shabbos Chazayin, which is the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. So we'll be finishing it right before the Shabbos, hopefully. And in general, talks about the 3 weeks. And obviously, the approach we're going to take in Chassidus is not going to be so much focusing on the Galus aspect, but a little bit more on the Geula aspect. In this case, we're going to be talking about the personal Geula of each person. How, you know, our souls are in a state of gullus because we don't feel them so much. So it's sort of like the soul trapped in this body and trying to get its voice heard, and it's not necessarily heard so much. So the poor soul is sort of, it's kind of like, and Tanya gives the picture of like, take pity on your soul sometimes. Like sometimes like think about how your soul is so trapped and you're so busy with everything else and you kind of forget about it, right? So the neshama is sort of just like a little bit neglected. And how do we get the neshama to like emerge from this state of neglect, to let its voice empower the soul, that its voice should be heard? That's what Geula is, empowering our soul so that it comes out of the boundaries and the gullus that it's stuck in, and it's able to express itself. And so we're going to go on a long journey, and it actually ends up being quite practical, like really like actionable things that we can do to redeem our souls. It doesn't feel practical the whole time because we're going to deal with some lofty concepts, but hopefully we'll be able to like go high to bring it down. And is that all by way of introduction? One more point. What really drew me to this mimer is that it basically talks a lot about davening, the structure of davening, and we zoom in on certain tefillahs that we say really every day and explaining them in a whole new way that you've probably never heard before. So that's always cool. And that in itself is practical because you could use that every day. Okay, so all right, one more thing. Lots of introductory things. I numbered the lines of the mimer so that we don't have to be like count 12 lines from the top. So you can, this is a trick a friend of mine told me before I started teaching. Number the texts. It's very useful. Okay, so Tzion b'mishpat yipada v'shaveha b'tzedakah. So Tzion, Zion, will be redeemed through justice, and her captives will be redeemed through tzedakah. This is from Yeshaya, Parak Aleph of Yeshaya, Pasuk Chaf Zayin, I believe. And it's so the Alter Rebbe doesn't actually ask a question here. He just jumps right into it. But from the answer, we're going to get all the way at the end. We know the question, and the question that he has on this pasuk is that it seems to be repetitive, because in this case, is Tzion talking, when the word Tzion is not talking about the land, it's talking about the people of Tzion, right? That's who Tzion is talking about, especially if you learn the context. That's very obvious. So it seems to be repetitive. Isn't Shaveha her captives, meaning the people who lived in Tzion that are now no longer there? So it seems like, why are we saying two different people will be redeemed? Tzion and Shaveha. What's the difference between the two of them? Is that clear? Is it confusing? No? Okay. So that's our question over here. And we're going to answer it by going on a very long journey that seemingly has nothing to do with this. So we're moving away from that pasuk right now. Okay. behold, it writes, and these words that I commanded you today, perish ka'i al kol yam. This is referring to every day. Ki b'chol yam yayu b'einacha kechadashim. Every day they should be in your eyes as new. So basically, what we're saying over here is that it says, here are the commandments that I told you to do today. And the interpretation of the word hayam teaches us, I told you to do it today, that every single day you have to be doing the mitzvahs as if this is the first day you were commanded about them. Because what's like the biggest like sort of thing that takes away from our service of Hashem is the repetitiveness of it, right? We do the same things every single day. So it's hard to have kavanah, and it's hard to put intention into something, and it's hard to be mindful about something when you do it every single day. It's very easy to be mindful the first day that you heard about it, right? Then you're like all excited and you're motivated, and that's great, right? But then as time passes, we lose our energy, our excitement about it. So it says, that's why it says in Shema, Mitzav Hayam, I commanded you to do it today. You have to feel like I commanded you to do it today. And this is actually even brought in the Shulchan Aruch as almost like as a halachic thing, that we need to have that same energy every single day when we're doing the mitzvahs. Now that almost seems to be impossible. Like that's a really difficult thing to ask from us, that we should be able to have this vigor and energy as if we were commanded to do it today when we were not actually, at least not in the way that we view the world, right? We live in a world of time and space. We're human beings. We are stuck in this, we're stuck as humans, right? We can't stop being human. And as human beings, we are confined by time, and time puts its limitations on us. So if we've been doing the mitzvahs day after day after day, it's impossible for us to consider it as if it was today. Right? That doesn't seem like something possible to ask of me, to have the same energy. Maybe you could say, oh, as the relationship with Hashem develops, and as you learn deeper, can approach it with a new understanding. But that's not what it's saying over here. It's saying have the excitement as if it was today. As if it was today that you first heard about it. So that seems to be asking too much, right? So how are we going to understand this? Is we're going to talk a little bit about our neshama and why it came into this world and what it gets from coming into this world, okay? So in order to understand that about our neshama, like I said, we've been doing a lot of jumping. On the third page, I copied a picture of a tefillah that we say every single day. And even people who are very busy doing lots of other things and don't have so much time to daven, usually will even say this because it's part of morning brachas. It's like really part of the essential davening, the tefillah of Elokai Neshama. And we're going to take a much deeper dive into these words, and that's going to help us understand how we can make each day the mitzvahs be like they're new, and that will explain to us Tzion b'mishpat about it. All right. So I am on line number 4. Kihine, in the middle of the line. Kihine, tachlis yeridas haneshamas milamaila. Because, like to explain this, the purpose of the descent of the soul, milamaila, from above, shahayu sham mikaidem, where it was before, shesesh made bereshis, before the world was created. Okay, we'll pause there. Souls predate the world, okay? Everything in this world is created. Souls were there even before Hashem created the world. So at a certain point, is it time? It's confusing because time is a creation as well. So that's already a whole philosophical question. What was the time before there was time? But like at what point does God decide to create the world if there's no time? But we're not going to get into that right now. But at a certain point, Hashem decides to create the world, right? And on the first day, he creates day and night, right? Second day, we keep going through all the days of creation. And what day was the human being created? On the 6th day, right? But that was only the day that the human body was created. The soul, and specifically the Jewish soul, predates even creation. And there's a number of different proofs that are brought for this. A number of things. First of all, it says Yisrael alu b'machshava. The Jewish people came up in Hashem's thoughts, right? So how did Hashem create the world? What tool did he use to create the world? With speech, right? He created the world with speech. Right? So he created the world with speech. Speech is for the sake of something that's outward from you, right? We don't need speech really for ourselves. Speech is for the sake of communicating with someone else. Now, it could, in the end, help you understand what you were thinking better when you communicated through speech, because when you like bring it down to communicate it with someone else, it can like trigger even a deeper process. But at the end of the day, speech is for something else. When you're all alone, all you need is your thoughts, right? Your thoughts are how you communicate with yourself, right? Because we have all this information sort of stored in our brains, and then we have to pull forward in order to think one thought at a time or to concentrate on something, you pull from like your whole storage system that you have in your brain, and you pull forward one thought, and that's what you concentrate on, right? And that's the process of thinking. The Jewish people, their souls, our souls don't start in the world of speech, which is where our bodies start, and even where angels and all other created beings all are sourced in the world of speech. The Jewish soul comes from Hashem's thought, and thought is higher than creation. Thought is a much, much, much deeper place. It also says, I believe the Medrash says, "B'mi nimlach b'nishmasem shel tzadikim." Before Hashem decided to create the world, he had a consultation. Who did Hashem consult with? So it says, who did Hashem consult with to decide if he should create the world? And it says, the souls of tzaddikim. Now, obviously, Hashem is not like talking with the souls and saying, should I create it? Should I not create it? Going through pros and cons. Rather, it's explained that when Hashem saw the pleasure that he was going to derive from the souls after they come down into this world and fulfill his desire, he decided to create the world, right? But that means that those souls had to exist, right? So these souls, and it explains that the Amich Kulam Tzadikim, the Jewish people are all, especially on the soul level, we are all tzaddikim. So this is talking about all of our souls. Hashem saw the pleasure that we were going to give him, every one of us sitting here, that we were going to give him, and that's sort of what motivated his creation of the world. So it actually talks about it right here. There's a debate if they were created on the second day or I think on the fifth day, because some people explain that, some explanations say that, oh, they were like the birds, the day that the birds were created. So I guess that's where we get the image of the flying angels. But yeah, so they were actually created on days of creation. Yeah, so Malachim, they seem to be so spiritual, right? And so holy, and almost holier than us, but that's not true, because if we come before creation, that means we're coming from a higher source than creation, a deeper place.
Wasn't Hashem like the Malachim?
Sorry? Right. We will make, right. Well, first of all, he could be talking to Malachim because Malachim were already created when Adam's actual physical body was created, right? So, but it could just be a way of speaking. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into this topic in depth. But yeah, so the Malachim were created before the human's physical body. But the soul was created before the Malachim. It comes from a much higher and deeper place. Okay, so if that's what we're establishing, then our question is, if the soul is so lofty and deep, then, and this is a question we've probably encountered before, why put the soul into a body? Why do this? Obviously, most of the time, it doesn't seem like our body enhances our service of God. I mean, we do serve Hashem with our bodies, but a lot of times it's the biggest deterrent from our relationship with Hashem is that we get caught up in our body life, and that becomes our focus instead of our soul life. Like we said earlier, right? The soul, it seems like the soul is in gullus in the body. It seems to be in prison almost when it's in the body. So what is the point of going into the body? Yeah.
But where is the balance? Because we cannot be only spiritual beings. We also have like spiritual bodies.
Absolutely.
Where is the balance?
Right. So
that is only
right.
Place you have to be.
Right. So obviously the body is important because, like we're just saying right now, the soul is coming from such a high place, and God decided to put it into the body. That means that the body has its function, and it must be assisting the soul some way. right? So when we understand the function of the body, then we're able to understand how we can take care of our bodies in a way that is productive and will enhance our service of God without getting so lost in it, which is sometimes what happens. Sometimes we get a little too lost in the body world, and so we don't focus on the soul world. When you understand why the soul had to come to the body, we're able to then approach it from a totally like a more holistic place and a balanced place, and treat each one with what it's supposed to be treated. Right? Make sense? Okay, so yeah, so we came to the conclusion of this, that we do come into the body. The body has some sort of role. Why is it that the soul comes down into the body? Right? There must be some sort of advantage that it gets. But how does it get an advantage? It doesn't make sense. If we say the world comes from a lower place than the soul does, then how does the soul have an advantage when it comes into the body? Right? So that's what we learn every day when we say Elokai Neshama. So I'm going to skip a little bit, and I'm going to skip to, one second. Okay. So line number 9. So ulahavin inyan ha'aliyah, and to understand what is the advantage that the soul has of coming down to the world. Even though the soul comes from such a high source, how is it possible that it gets an aliyah? In order to understand that aliyah, so we're going to look at Elokai Neshama Shenasatabi Taharahi. So this is a tefillah we say every day. Elokai, God, Neshama Shenasatabi Taharahi. The soul that you gave to me, it is pure. Now, what we're saying when we say it is pure is exactly this point. Not only is it pure, but it comes from this high source of pure godliness, right? It comes from this place that even is higher than the world. That's what we're saying when we're saying Taharahi. And then what happens? Then the soul goes through a little bit of a journey. Then we go on, Atabarasa. You created it. And that means that the soul, what does it mean you created it? It goes from being this entirely pure and thing that precedes creation, and it comes down into the world of creation, right? So the soul then is sort of created, right? There's its source that's totally pure. In its source, the soul has no independence. It's just entirely like one with God, right? It doesn't know who it is. It's just completely and totally pure. Then it becomes a created thing. This makes sense, right? Now it's this own individual soul, right? And it has its own identity. This is my soul. This is your soul. This is someone else's soul, right? It has its own identity. It has its own sort of characteristics. Different souls are from different, in the world of creation, different souls, they start to differentiate and sort of gain their own characteristics, right? So it's created. Then it goes into Atza Yitzarta, moves down from the world of Bria, which is a much higher world, and moves down into the world of Yetzira, where again, we're not going to get into the details of what that means, but it gains, again, more of its own characteristics, its own forms, its own, you can say, sort of personality, right? Each person has sort of a different personality. And then until finally, what happens? Ata nefachtabi. Then it gets blown with force into a body, right? So we have the soul in its purest state, and it moves down through creation until it unites with its physical body, right? And once it's in its physical body, the Ata Mishamra Vikirbi, you guard it within me. You safeguard it within me. What does this mean, that you safeguard the soul within me? Body and soul are not supposed to be able to come together. They're two entirely different sorts of creatures. The soul is eternal, it's spiritual, it's not limited by things like time and space. The body is limited by time and space. The body is very physical. The body is living in this physical reality. And these two things, they're entirely opposite, right? And opposite things are not supposed to be able to come together, right? What's the only way you can really unite two opposite things together? So let's think about this just in general. When you have two differences of opinion or whatever, two things that are different, sometimes two things are different in a way that you can talk. Like you have two sides and you could talk it out and come to some sort of compromise, right? But sometimes there are two, let's say, opinions that literally just disagree with each other, and there's no way for them to talk it out and come to a compromise. So what will you have to do in that scenario? You have to go to someone who has more power than both of you, and that's how you could come to some sort of resolution, right? So let's say, right, so then you go to the judge, and the judge, who's in a position of power and has power over both the individuals, is able to say, this is the conclusion, deal with it, right? Figure it out. In the space of something bigger than you, two smaller things are able to exist together, right? Two contradicting things can exist together. So in this case, when we're saying Ba'atam Shamar B'Kirbi, soul and body are not supposed to live together. And they're not supposed to be able to exist together. So what keeps our soul in our body? So the soul being something spiritual and lofty and coming from such a high place, the body being this created thing. It takes God himself, God in his essence, to unite the body and the soul in a way that they're able to sort of stay together. I'll give a few more examples to emphasize this point. In general, we have two different kinds of life force sort of within us. You have what you might call like the individualized life force that really enters into the person. And that would be, I guess you can say, the general life that every single human being has, right? So you have, in your brain, you have a specific life force that allows you to think and that allows you to control all the whole nervous system of the body. In the hands, you have the particular life force that allows you to use your hands. In your legs, in each of your organs, the heart has its particular life force that's directed to each of these particular things, right? That's the general life that we have. Then there is just the fact that you're alive, right? Just the fact that you're alive. That's different than the general life force that you have in each part of your body, right? In a way, you can say that the general life force in each part of our body sort of has a hierarchy. If, God forbid someone was sick and they had multiple organ dysfunction, right? And they went to the hospital. They were in a terrible car accident, right? So if there's a lung that's punctured and a leg that's broken, which one are they going to deal with first? The lung, obviously, right? Because in the sense of each organ being alive with a specific vitality, that has a sort of hierarchy. Different organs are more important to us staying alive than others, so we would deal with one before the other, right? But when it comes to that general life force that's just keeping you alive in general, the fact that you are alive, that life force is the same in your lungs and in your toes, right? It's just the fact that you are alive. It doesn't differentiate between different levels of existence, of living, right? And this life force it's kind of what we would call, it's a makif. It doesn't actually surround us, but it means that it's not specific. It's more encompassing. It's a generalized life force, and it's much, it comes from a much, much higher source than the individual life force as it goes into each part of our body. It's so far beyond who we are that, put it this way, when it comes to Hashem himself, right? When it comes to God himself, like we said before, what happened? What angels were created on one of the days of creation? Because to Hashem, an angel and an ant on a certain level of godliness, as he is for himself, are exactly the same, right? Because he's God, right? So something that's spiritual in our eyes, oh, that's spiritual, that's high, that's lofty. To God, it's just one of my creations. It's just one of the other things I created. To God himself, right? Hashem as he is in his essence. So in order for us to marry these two opposites of body and soul, even though the soul is spiritual, there's something higher than spirituality. What's higher than spirituality? God himself, right? So what is the advantage of the soul coming down into the body? Is that now it has contact with God himself, Because as a soul, all he's doing is hanging out in heaven, having fun or whatever, learning Torah, using that spiritual side of himself. But it's only when the soul has to go down and sort of marry the world and become like entrenched within the world, that's when he's meeting up with this opposite, or she. It is meeting up with its opposite. And when it meets up with its opposite is when the essence of God is required to come into the picture, right? And so that's when that's the ascent that the soul has by coming down into the body. This point of Misham, the Ata Mishamra Bekirbi, and you watch over it within me. Who is the you that we're talking to over here? That's Hashem himself comes and watches over my soul, meaning he like creates this godly energy that manages to pull the body and soul together. Does that make any sense so far? Yeah. Okay. So maybe we'll read a little bit of that inside. Continuing on line number 12. Okay. So we said, the soul you gave to me, it is pure. Perish tahara hiruila. When we're saying that it's pure, it means we're talking about this high elevated level of tahara, which we said before, right? We're talking about even preceding the world, this super high level of purity, of godliness. And then you create it, perish bria, brings it down into the world of bria, hainu yesh ma'ayin, meaning that it now becomes a creation, yesh ma'ayin, becomes an independent thing, ad nafach until it is actually, blown into the body, his lapshas hanashama b'seich chias haguf, the soul actually becomes like clothed within the body, lachyeset, to give it life, v'ata mashamra, and you guard over it that it shouldn't leave the body. What this element that's guarding that the soul should stay in the body, it doesn't actually enter into the body, but it's this encompassing energy. And this is this extremely, extremely, extremely high level of Sevev, which, if you're going to study further, is the Alter Rebbe's sort of parallel to Atzmas. Basically, God himself coming down and uniting, making sure my body and soul stay together. And we went through most of this outside. We're going to skip a little bit until line number 18. Okay? So we've come to this conclusion. If you were just like meditating every morning, probably not every morning, but if you take a few seconds once a week when you're saying Elokai Neshama, what is the shift that we've learned? We're not just saying, God, you gave me a soul and you created it. We're saying, God, I understand that my purpose, that you created me with a purpose. And I come from such a pure, lofty place. And I'm now empowered by the fact that I have God himself making sure that I'm staying alive, making sure that my neshama and my body are, staying together and not being separated. And that's coming from I have access to you yourself because I came down into this body, right? And so that means that I have such a huge, it's like this massive, it's almost like a little bit of an understanding of I have it's telling me that I have a really strong and important purpose, right? Because if Hashem himself is coming to keep me alive, that must mean that I have an extremely important purpose over here, right? Okay, so now we're going to continue on a little bit in, it's going to continue on in the tefillah, and we're going to, from understanding this tefillah, we're going to gain a little bit more of like very practical tips for how we get out of gullus, okay? And it's, in general, we're going to use this tefillah as, we're going to zoom in on it, and it's going to we're then going to actually apply it to the whole davening and the order that we daven every day, okay? So, on line, what did I say we're skipping to? Line number 18. So it continues on. Vihine, what do we say after that? Kol zman sheneshama b'kirbi, maidat ani. The entire time that the neshama is in me, I have to acknowledge you, right? My dad I have to acknowledge you. That's what my dad means. It can mean, actually, there's a few different translations that my dad can have. It can mean to think, like hoda, and it can mean acknowledge. I acknowledge that you are. Shakal echad ve'echad, that every single person, yachol lahaides laHashem, is able to acknowledge Hashem. Aval achar kach tzarich liyasbarach ata Hashem, and then we continue on in the tefillah. Ribbon kol ma'asim v'dan kol neshamas, right? You are the creator of all, the master of all creations, the master of the souls. And then it continues. We finish off with Baruch ata Hashem. Blessed are you, Hashem, hamachzir neshamas rifkar mesim, right? That returns our souls to sort of redeem our dead bodies after a night of sleep. But so first we have, okay, let's back up because this can get confusing. Okay, so first we say moda, first we say thanks, but saying thanks and having this haida is not enough. We have to continue on to the level of saying a bracha, saying Baruch Ata Hashem. What does this mean? What's the difference between acknowledging Hashem and making a bracha? Moda Ani, that we say every day, has no bracha in it, right? That's just a state of acknowledging Hashem. So what's the difference between acknowledging and bracha? So one of the places where we hear the word moda a lot would be, let's say, in the Mishnah, and also brought in the Gemara it will say, the example that's brought always in Chassidus is moda chachamim l'Rabbi Meir. That the chachamim, moda, they accede, thank you. They accede to Rabbi Meir. What does that mean? It means that there's an argument over here, right? There's an argument between Chachamim and Rabbi Meir. Now, when it's saying that they accede, it doesn't mean necessarily that they actually understand his reasoning, right? It just means that they understand enough to know that he's right, because it's not saying, what would be the word for agree? Yeah, but I'm saying in Hebrew. Laskin, exactly. That would be, oh, I agree with what you're saying. Like, I understand what you're saying and I agree with you, right? Moda, the word implies within it a certain level of like a bittul, where it's like, I know that you're right. I don't understand all your reasoning. Your reasoning's a little bit too lofty for me, right? It's a little higher than I can understand, but I have a sense that you're right, right? So I am acceding to you, right? Uh-huh. Right, right. It's a certain it's an acknowledgement. Yeah. Yeah. It's deferring, exactly. Now, on a certain level, no, back up. So let's stop over there. Fine. So if we're saying modeh to Hashem, that means that it must be that we have some sort of argument, because modeh means that we thought differently, and fine, I'm acceding to you, right? We had two different opinions and I'm acceding to you, right? So what is the argument that the soul has, or that the person has with God? Like, what are we arguing with God? So the Alter Rebbe explains over here that our argument is our understanding and our view of reality. And we've actually discussed this before Shavuos. We were talking about seeing things from the top down or bottom up, right? There's two different viewpoints of the world and creation. We say that the world was created yesh me'ayin. What does that mean? It means that ayin, before the world was created, there was nothing, and now there is something, right? But basically we're saying that what was before is nothing. Why? Because we can't experience it. It's not part of our experience. If we can't experience it, then it's nothing, right? Because we can't experience it. But from Hashem's viewpoint, was it really yesh ma'ayin? No, because he doesn't, not that Hashem doesn't consider himself ayin, it sounds stupid, but God is the truest reality that there is, right? Which means that the world before there was creation was the truest reality that could have been. It's not a reality that we could ever understand. It's probably one of the things that can hurt your brain the most, is trying to think about before creation. And again, especially because we're so stuck within the time and the space and like trying to think about that. What does that mean if it's not in time? What's before? It's not really before because there's no time, and it can really start to hurt your brain because we literally cannot understand it, right? Because it's not within our realm of understanding. It's not within my brain's ability to comprehend this thing. So it's not like something that I could sit and argue with someone back and forth for a long time, right? There are certain things that if I want to agree with them, it needs to come from a place of emunah, not understanding, right? So if I was to believe that the world, that God is the truest creation that there is, right? And I am just created by him, and really I am nothing before God. Is that something I can know? Can I know it, like, for real? No, because I feel like I'm real, right? Like, I feel like I feel my existence very, very strongly, so I can't know it, right? If I want to be able to understand the awesomeness of God in like the truest sense, we can look at nature and be awe-inspired. That's something we can understand. There are certain elements of like God's creation that we could be excited by that is within our realm of understanding. But then there's God himself that is not within our realm of understanding. That needs to be left to Emunah because it's impossible, right? It's impossible to understand. So over here, when we're saying moda, when we're saying, let me get the exact words, we're saying the argument between us that I think the world is real and you're just like something I think about. We're saying, no, God, we believe that you're actually the true reality and we're just, your creations, like nothing before you. But that can only be done from a place of moda, from hoda'ah, not from a place of I understand, right? But there's a problem in just being in that emunah space. What happens when you're just in an emunah space is that you can't internalize really and deep. It's exact same. The whole reason that we need it is the source of the problem, right? We need it because we can't understand it, but because we can't understand it, then we can't actually we don't know how to live with it because we don't understand it, right? So we don't know how to integrate it into our lives. We don't know how to integrate God's realness into our lives because we can't understand it, right? And we can only integrate things into our lives when we understand them, when we're able to like truly internalize them and swallow them, then we're able to live with them in a real way. Okay, is anything I'm saying making sense?
It's like
Okay.
This clock,
Right. Same, yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's a Kabbalah. But the problem is that if you stay in the state of just Kabbalah soul, you become resentful. You don't actually have that same energy like you would if you could understand it. So we say Modeh, we go to this place of Hoda'ah, but it's not enough to just stay in that space. It's not enough to just say, I have emunah in God and I'm not gonna take it further than that. Okay, we have to continue on to then saying a bracha. Then we say the words Baruch Atah Hashem, right? Then we have to move on into the world of bracha. Why? Because bracha is not like modeh. What is the word bracha there are many different explanations of the word bracha. It's like a pool, there's a knee, right? But there's lots of different explanations for the word bracha. But the word that we're going to pull on right now is bracha is hamshacha. It's drawing down. So what is bracha? We take something that is super high and we pull it down. It says that it's a famous song, a Yossi Green song, Avram Fried, right? But it says Yishmael Kohen Gadol went into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. And when he went in there, he saw Achasriel, which is some sort of picture of God somehow. He sees Hashem sitting on his throne, and Hashem tells Yishmael b'ni barcheni, Yishmael, my son, bless me. What does it mean? Why is God asking a person to bless him? In the sense that we understand the word bless, like, oh, I'm giving you a bracha that you should have, like good things in your life. Like, obviously that's not what it's referring to. Hashem doesn't need us to bless him, right? So what is Hashem saying when he's saying Yishmael b'ni barcheni, Yishmael, bless me? He's saying, draw me into this world. Show the people, right? That's bracha is drawing down. Reveal me in this world. Bracha is a language of revelation. So it's not enough to stay in the word of moda, of emunah. We then have to draw the emunah into a space of revelation. And in this case, the revelation is not necessarily to the world, but it's a revelation to myself, right? I can acknowledge God and say, I believe that you're real. And then I need to figure out a way somehow, which we will continue next week, discussing a little bit more. Then not next week, 2 weeks. Then we need to figure out a way to reveal it to myself. So what does revelation in this case means? Taking it from a state of emunah to a state of now it's real to me, right? And just because we're short on time, so we're just finish this concept outside. But so we started off so far, just like do a little summary because we spoke about a lot of concepts so far. So we said Tzion b'mishpat tipada. Why is it that there's this double language of Tzion and Ushaveha? Who are the two people that are being referred to over here? And what's the true meaning of this geula? And we said in order to understand that, we have the question of how can it be that every single day the Torah and mitzvah should be new to us? And we said in order to understand that, we're going to understand the purpose of the soul. And we said the soul comes from the super lofty place and it draws down into the world. Why would it come down into a body if the body is so much lower than it? It needs an aliyah, and the aliyah is the fact that because it's coming into the body, we trigger God's essence to come and guard over the soul in the body to make sure that they stay together, right? So they can fulfill their mission. And as a result of understanding that, we said so then moving on from there in the tefillah, we say that we acknowledge Hashem, but we also need to have the bracha. We also need to draw him. We need to have the emunah, but then we also have to draw out the emunah. And this is what we're going to conclude with. This recipe of first having emunah and then having the bracha is brought throughout davening. We start off davening with moda'ani, right? Moda'ani is emunah. Right? Like we said before, we don't say a bracha in moda'ani. And then we end off davening with Shmona Esrei. What is Shmona Esrei? Shmona Esrei brachos. It's 18 brachos, right? So we finish off with all the brachos. And the key to going from a state of emunah to a state of revealing Hashem to ourselves is in the middle of davening in Shema, which is v'ahavta, loving God. So this is sort of the order of davening. Hada'a, acknowledging, Ava, love, and then bracha, revealing. And that's the structure of davening is acknowledging, love, revelation. And this is the cliffhanger. So what does that mean exactly? How do we go from each of these stages? What does the Ava mean? And how does that lead into the bracha? And how does that come back to renewing our excitement for Torah every single day? And how does that lead into our understanding of Galus and Geula? So we will do part 2 in 2 weeks. Mitzvah Hashem.